ready. First, I'd like to welcome you all to the Sugarcreek Photography Gallery. We're here in the remote village town of Velbrook, which only seems remote sometimes. We are 12 photographers who are members of the gallery.
I thought it was 13.
Could be 13. If we count our guest artist, it's 13. So with Debbie, it's 13. But none of us have been professional in our careers, and that was a question I answered earlier, and I just wanted to say it again. None of us have been professional photographers. We're engineers and doctors and navigators and IT people who making pictures has been a passion. We have established as a way to maybe increase our traffic a guest artist wall in the front, and the artist this month is Debbie Cosenza. Other artists have included, oh God, I'm going to lose, Holtzman. Brenda Holtzman. She was one who I met along with Debbie at the Beaver Creek Senior Center when they hung together in the show. There will be more from the Beaver Creek Senior Center because they do a good job. But we have developed a friendship and we contact, and she finds places for me to go photograph, and that's all good and cool. So Debbie Cosenza does Encaustics, which is an interesting process that sort of sits a bit on the side of photography, and it's your show.
All right. Thank you for coming.
Yeah. Welcome.
So I'm Debbie, and I have my little notes here. I've never done a PowerPoint presentation, so if I move around in a weird way, just go move me where I need to be.
Yes, ma'am.
So just a little bit about me. I was an artist in high school, and through college I ended up in interior design and worked for a company that did commercial interior design, elements for interiors. If you work at the base, you may have seen their trucks out there. So I worked there for about 13 years or so. And then after I had my son, Jonathan, who is right here with us today, 23 years ago, I slowly worked out of that and came into scrapbooking, because when you have a child, a baby, you have to scrapbook. That was really popular back then. So I started scrapbooking and got connected with some of the scrapbook stores in the area, and one is called Marco's Paper, but they also have art supplies. And so I began teaching there and went from scrapbooking back into my art world over a period of years. And so that led me to want to focus more on my art, what I wanted to make, rather than just teaching what people wanted to learn, which I enjoyed, and it was definitely part of my process. But it led me to taking time off from teaching to focus more on my art, and which is on the front wall right there. So that is the brief background. Also in that process, my friend Brenda and I started a company called White Iris Arts, and we did workshops. We both taught and brought in other artists in the area, and we did that for 3 or 4 years, I think, and then COVID hit and workshops kind of went by the wayside. So then both Brenda and I just started really focusing more on our art. So that is a brief background.
Just
It worked earlier.
go ahead and just hit the enter button on your computer.
This computer is like
Nope, still didn't go.
She checked it all out earlier.
Yeah, it was working then.
I know.
Jeff, this
Oh, here we go. Yay! Anyway, so I just thought I'd start a little bit with some of my influences. Having taught for several years and using art materials, of course, you're always online, you're looking at things, trying to find what products are out there, and I ran across Encaustic Art probably 7 or 8 years ago, actually maybe a little longer ago than that now, and I was just drawn to it. In particular, Nancy Crawford was an artist that I just enjoyed her composition, how she set up her pieces, and I was able to take a few classes with her in person. Was from Canada, and she passed away just a few years ago, but I just really, her method of teaching drew me in quite a bit. Then another artist that I found in my encaustic search his name is Dale Roberts. Totally different style. He has a more realistic style of painting, and I think his art shows some of the beautiful qualities that encaustic can be used for in a piece. Because with encaustic, it's painted hot, and you paint in layers. And so with a piece like this, and I think with the degrading facade, he's painted layers of color, and then you scrape back or you melt back, and those colors come forward. And so just the way he uses encaustic is just really amazing. And another artist that caught my eye is Robin Luciano Beatty, and her work is much more abstract. But when you get up close, which you can't see too much in this picture, but there's all kinds of, there'll be photography in there, there will be words or text, nails and hammers, a lot of mixed media in that. And then also the grid is something that drew me in, which you kind of notice that I like grids, and that's what some of my pieces are. And so those are a few of the people that influenced me in the early days of my learning about encaustic. And then encaustic is an ancient Greek word. It means to burn in. And so always heat is used in the process of painting with encaustic. I didn't bring my big setup, but there is a picture in a little bit. But you use a heat gun, you can use irons, you can use a torch. You melt it in skillets, and it's molten, so it's painted in a molten state. And you have to fuse, they call it fusing, when you fuse the layers on top of each other. And so they bond. And so that is encaustic, what that means as far as the medium and as far as the process of making things. It's been around for centuries. Some of the earliest pieces, these are Fayum mummy portraits from Egypt, painted on wooden panels. They are dated early, late 1st century BC to early 2nd century. So they have lasted a long time. And so just that process, that painting process, has a longevity to it that doesn't degrade as easily as some other mediums. So then we go back to, well, I should say, I did want to mention also back in the history of it, it kind of lost favor with artists for quite a while because it's kind of a hard medium to work with, and there just wasn't the supplies were not readily accessible, so it was just more difficult to work with. But in the late, say 1980s, 1990s, it kind of made it a resurgence, and there's quite a few more artists that are painting with encaustic now. And then, so that process being made more accessible, you just see more of it out there, which I'm glad, because that's how I found it. I didn't have to do a ton of research to get out there. So then I wanted to talk a little bit about my process and how I paint, some of the things that I do before I actually put paint to panel. I do a lot of journaling, and I have some of my journals here. It's just writing about what I think about my art. My art is based in nature, and so I often go to Cedar Cliff Falls, which is just outside of Cedarville. Cool little park. If you haven't been there, it's a really pretty park. And so I'll go hang out there. There's some trails that you can go down to Massey Creek, which is what runs through there. So you can kind of go off-road and go down to some of the areas and just sit there in the water and hang out. So I write journals, and then I also have sketchbooks where I do a lot of different sketching, painting, working with different materials. It's where I try things out. I have a box of things that these are just where I'm trying different things out. So there's all that background that goes into how it happens before there's finished pieces. Because that's where you learn, and that's how you figure things out and pick what you like and what you want to use. And so I was influenced by some of those other artists about Encaustic, and some of the things and I guess this is kind of where the influences and the process of how I create art come together, and why Encaustic is my medium of choice at this point in life is because some of the qualities that it has are reflective of what I like to say in my paintings. And so Encaustic is a layered medium. It's not uncommon for people to have 15, 20 layers of encaustic when they paint, depending on what you do. Most of my paintings up there probably only have 3 to 4 layers of encaustic on them, just because of my process right now. Also with encaustic, when you're using just the medium, it has, you can pass this around, but it has a clear, sorry Jeff.
No, you're fine.
There's a medium which is clear, and so when you melt that, you just get a glaze over your piece so you can actually see through it. So there's a luminosity that occurs with encaustic that I enjoy. And this piece going around, there's quite a bit of texture on that, and that is another quality of encaustic that drew me to that, is the way, actually, here we go, is the way that you can create texture with encaustic. It is painted hot, but when you let it cool just a little bit, it will grab onto itself. And so you can create some texture and depth. There's just different ways that you can layer that encaustic. And so creating texture is definitely one of the qualities that most artists that paint with encaustic really enjoy. And not only texture, but then there's that glass smooth finish that you can obtain with encaustic.
Is there certain substrates you have to?
Yes.
Is that like Bakelite there?
That is like a MDF board.
Bakelite, yeah.
Is that what that is? Okay, yes. So encaustic, because of its properties, it's not very flexible. And so, like, to put it on a regular canvas, if the canvas moves, it would
Sure.
probably crack.
You do it on like slate and things like that?
You, the main properties that you need to paint encaustic is a sturdy surface and absorbency. And so that would be with some rocks, there is that.
Like slate and rock, yeah.
And wood, which most of my pieces are on cradle board, which is a wood surface. Actually, this piece This has some encaustic, it's paper, which most of my pieces are paper, but it's paper, and then I do have some encaustic over that, and some gold leaf. So this is just an encaustic background, and that is just on paper like, I don't even think it's watercolor paper. Actually, it looks like it's maybe a Japanese paper, so it's a very thin paper, and I have a very thin coat of encaustic in it. And so I can bend it like this because it's embedded, it soaks into the surface and is embedded in that.
Did you dip that?
That I did not dip, I painted. So normally I have a skillet which is there in the corner, and I heat my paint on the skillet in different pots, and that to melt them, because you paint melted or molten, and so you can paint your pieces on it. I was just trying to find. So you would paint the wax molten onto a piece, and then you fuse it in. You either burn it with a heat gun, irons, some of the tacking irons, torches.
You don't turn your back, do you?
And
I asked him
careful.
if he didn't turn his back. Right.
Right, watch that torch. And there are actually some surfaces that they're making. One's called Encaustiflex, and it is a bendable fabric-ish. I don't know what it's made out of, but it is bendable, and you could mold it and use encaustic on it and make forms and shapes with that. It adheres well to plaster, that absorbency, so you can use the plaster like that's on a little scrim that you can shape. You can use encaustic on that.
This is amazing.
You can do.
I saw that already. Okay, please.
Does that kind of answer your
Yes, thank you,
question?
thank you.
So, and that kind of does lead into that next part, compatibility with other mediums and media, meaning papers. So, for example, this is an encaustic book that I made several years ago. It's probably 8 years old, maybe older, and it's actually copper. And in order to make it so that the surface would take the encaustic, you can etch it and you'll get a little bit of adhesion, but also underneath I have collaged some paper like book text that is collaged under that, and so even that paper gives a surface that the encaustic can cling to.
It's amazing.
And stamping, you can stamp into it when it's warm, you can stamp into it, you can create texture not only with a brush but by pressing into it with all different kinds of fibers, all different ways that you can create textures. You can use
Do you solder with metals and stuff like that?
I haven't tried that, so I can't really speak to that. You might be able to add the encaustic to after it's already been soldered, because obviously the heat would melt it and you would lose your encaustic.
I was thinking of soldering onto the copper before you.
Yeah, right. Yeah, before you
You can
did
make
anything.
outlines.
Yeah, right. And some of that, you just try stuff and see what happens, and that's part of the art thing. Uh-huh.
20 years younger, I might take this up. Maybe 30.
Another quality is the ability to manipulate it as far as scraping, incising, embedding. So
Oh, you want to get this back?
I was just going to see if there's these pieces. So these pieces right here, you can see the circles in here. You can etch, when the wax is warm, you can etch your circles. You can fill them with wax or with other oil paints. This is an oil paint stick by RNF, who does make a lot of encaustic. But if there are things that are etched into a surface, there are ways you can bring that etching out so you can see it. So that is also a fun activity with encaustic. And some of my pieces up there on the wall, the overheating is where you get that little flowy kind of look to encaustic, where the colors kind of will blend together. Embedding would be when you have some, like a piece of paper that you melt into. So actually this piece, you can see some text in that. And that is a piece of paper, a piece of white paper, probably like a tissue paper that had some text into it. And you can heat the encaustic and embed that text or that piece of paper, light objects, you can embed into it and then go ahead and color and do things over the top of that. And another reason I brought my books is that is something that you can, there's so many different ways that you can use it, from paintings to sculptures to books. So these are just doing paint. So a couple book covers I created. And these are encaustic covers, they're called monoprints. And to do a monoprint, I would put the paint on my skillet in a design that I liked, and then take your paper, put over it, and you get your monoprint. The other way you can do it is actually put your paper on a skillet and take your ink, or not ink, your paint. The encaustic usually comes in a cube or a rectangle of paint, so this is what they come in the colors. So you could actually put your paper down and then draw your design on top with because it's on a skillet like that, the heat would melt the wax and you can draw on top of that. You can also paint on top of that. Different ways you can do that too. Any questions about anything right now?
We're amazed.
All right, good. I lost my picture.
That's amazing. Beautiful, that's
All righty.
Francis. He does encaustic.
Do you know, did we bring in that big piece of watercolor paper? Would you mind running out to get that? You're gonna keep them back? So I just have a couple pictures that kind of show you my physical process. I have my journaling and playing and sketchbook part, but then this is how I physically make the paintings that are up there on the front wall. I take a large piece of watercolor paper and I use India ink or walnut ink, and I just make marks on the paper. Pretty random, not with a lot of thought, usually. Sometimes I have an idea in mind, but somewhat random. And then I let it sit for a little bit and I take a hose and I will spray it down, and you'll get these lighter shades, if you can see that from back there, where the ink washes away, but it still leaves like a residue. So it's kind of interesting. Nancy Crawford, one of my influence artists, that was something that she taught in her class, and that just kind of stuck with me, and I have pursued that now for quite a few years. And you can see kind of some of the nuances that happen with that. Then I will take I crop down. So here's so here is a piece of paper, and it just marks, and then you can kind of see the gray tones come from it being washed down. And you can kind of manipulate it a little bit to some degree, depends on the drying time, and if you wait too long, you don't get to lose any of your ink, and sometimes you just get gray mess, and so it's kind of interesting. You just don't quite know what's going to happen. But so that's how I start, and then I crop. I will go through and I will take. Usually I work in 4x4, 6x6, 8x8, 10x10s, and then some larger pieces. So I have little mats, which up in that upper corner, you can see a mat. So I'll go through and I will try to crop one of those sizes and find something that I think is interesting on my paper. I paint my cradle boards, they all get painted, and then the paper gets applied to the cradle boards, and those are how they look before they even have any wax on them. And sometimes I go, maybe I should just leave them like that because that looks kind of cool. But I usually end up not. And sometimes, like for example, probably if you see some of those pieces, you would be able to go look on some of my, those are the 4x4s, so they'd probably be in the 9 squares. You would go, oh, that's that piece. And some of them, you have no idea that would be that piece. And then just another, this is actually one of the pieces that's in the middle up front. This is what it started like, a big piece of paper, cropped, glued, and then that is the initial layers of paint when I applied to the product. And it obviously doesn't look like that now. So there's tons of, I probably have 20 or 30 layers of encaustic in those particular pieces in that center section. But then I just glazing around that, and you'll see a little bit of a cast, maybe a blue or green cast. If you look at those pieces, you'll see that on the sides of where that goes. So that is, that's a little bit of the process. And then another, let me see, so I think these pictures are up there. So both of these paintings are up there. This is some different iterations of where it went, how it started, where it went, what it became, and then it ends up like what's up there. And so what you see here is where I have, I'll pass this around. You can see on this bottom area, I have etched out my wax, and often I use this little tool, and I will make marks in my wax, and I carve those out. And then that's what the lines are that you see here. They are lines I've carved out, and then I will just paint over it and fill them in. I fill in the lines, and then I go back in and I scrape out the wax until the lines reveal. So I think for me that's one of the really cool things, because I mean you scrape those lines and you go, oh, that might be what I want. But then as you pull the excess wax away, and something pops out, and it's like, wow, that's even cooler than I thought. So that is part of this process here. There's a lot of scraping. Scraping back is something that I do on a regular basis. I paint and I go, and that really actually though becomes part of the layering of the piece. It becomes what the final piece is because of what's been underneath. Kind of like life, right? What's underneath becomes who you are.
What kind of wax? Is there a special wax?
Oh,
Whitehead?
well, no, you're perfect, because I totally forgot to say, Encaustic is made of beeswax and a damar resin. The resin helps to harden the beeswax because you know candles are fairly soft. And so the damar resin, it comes from trees. It helps to harden that and to give a little longer.
And is that the finish? I mean, do you have to put a?
You do not have to
That
put.
is the finish, right? Okay.
Right, exactly. You
Amazing.
You don't want to put any kind of, like you would on an oil painting or an acrylic painting, any of a varnish, you don't varnish wax. That is it,
Okay.
encaustic anyways. And this is kind of the process I was talking about, where I had scraped lines. You can see the lines on this far side of that last picture, which is that piece that you're going around. And then I just paint wax over it, fill in the lines, and then as you scrape away, the lines appear. And then you can just leave some of the wax, some of the encaustic medium, or encaustic paint, this is paint, to start that layering process. In this case, I have kind of a plant theme going on, botanical. And so that's kind of what that is.
Do you like, I haven't paid attention, I should have known this answer to this, but do you like to buff yours?
So,
Or do you like them like natural?
so interesting that you should ask that, because I have
You think you
here
had,
somewhere.
you thought you had.
Uh-huh. Sorry, Jeff. I have a couple of photo encaustic pieces, which because, oh gosh, right here. So different ways, and I'll get to that. But photo encaustic, because you all are photographers, you can use photographs, encaustic with photographs in various ways. Once again, a paper sometimes that you print on probably would not be a good paper for encaustic because it doesn't have the absorbency that the encaustic needs. And so it would, over time, crack or come off. So if you print on a watercolor paper, if you print on, I mean, these are actually printed on more like a computer paper. So something that will absorb the
cotton?
wax.
Cotton paper.
Cotton should work just fine, yeah, definitely. So something that absorbs the wax. And this has layers of the encaustic over the painting, and then in this particular case, I taped off an area that I wanted to be seen, and then created texture to help focus on this area.
But the underlying image is a photograph?
Yes, that Kurt took. We had a butterfly,
Can I see that? Can I
arboretum.
see that?
Yes, and I'll show you this. To answer
Oh my
Brenda's
gosh.
question, if you can see how this side
Yeah.
is a little more muted,
Yeah.
and this is shinier.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's where you want to look.
that's because you can buff encaustic.
This is beeswax.
Yeah, beeswax with a resin in it. So you can buff that to get a shinier image. And encaustic does tend over time, probably within the first 6 to 9 months, some of the impurities do come out of that. And so you can get that haze on it, but a pantyhose or a little microcloth will take that haze right off. And then you can buff it to whatever degree you want. Some people like that more muted, some like the shiny. So,
I got a torch.
and these are little,
There you go,
these are
man.
sort of photo encaustic. Well, they're not sort of, they are photo encaustic. They are pictures at Cedar Cliff, and then if you feel the front of it, what I've done on that is just to help preserve the photo, is take my encaustic medium, which comes, you can get it in bars, but this, I usually get these little pellets. And you can melt the little pellets on your skillet. You can also use things like this little tool and melt them right on the page. And
That's
I'll
the
show you
beeswax,
that
right?
in a minute. This is
Yeah, I bought a bunch of it, all came in pellets like that.
in the pellets, right? And so you can just melt it. When because I didn't want a very thick layer, I didn't really want to paint it on. And so this way I can kind of control on something like that book. The amount, for me, I can control it more easily if I just melt it with something like that little waxing iron.
Okay.
And then I can also get, if you felt that little texture, that comes from using the
Usually iron on top of it.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And actually on the two long paintings, if you look at them right, you can see a lot of texture on the side of those. And I use a ski iron. I used a ski iron on those. And once again, just moving that around will help create that texture.
If I can point out, just the 3 pictures you have on the screen showing how you do that would be great photography pieces.
Hmm.
What do you think?
Yeah,
I love it.
absolutely.
I love it.
So I think that is my last picture and my last slide. Anybody have any more questions about anything?
Yeah, I know, you're up there.
Did you say that about 8 years ago?
Yeah,
So you did that soon after you started?
yes, right. I did this quite some time ago. There's a lady in Cincinnati, Cheryl Local, and she's an encaustic artist. And we've actually did a workshop with her when Brenda and I had White Iris Arts. She was one of our artists that we brought up, but years ago I had taken classes with her for encaustic.
So are you doing classes now yourself?
I kind of last January, February, early last year, I stopped teaching just to kind of figure out where I was going and what I was doing, and I kind of have it in the pipeline to start that back up.
Is there enough resources and stuff in here to do a class in here?
Yeah.
I'll sign up.
All right.
There we go.
I love the photography aspect.
The Rosen photography.
Yeah.
So I did make this little book, and it's basically encaustic with alcohol ink. And so it's a 2-part book on one side, and it's India ink on the back, just showing how you can combine some different mediums, in this particular case, alcohol ink or India ink with encaustic. And once again, normally this kind of paper, you would not have something that was durable, but because there's such a thin layer. And once again, this was, oops, I don't have it up, but on my skillet, I painted on my skillet so I can get a really thin layer of wax.
Sorry, how many questions?
No,
We're
no,
up in
I like
Alva
questions.
Cove in Alaska, it's a little artist community up into it, but I think a woman was doing this with octopus ink.
Oh, wow.
And her whole
Yeah.
gallery was full this time, remember that?
Yeah, that's not pretty.
I don't know if that's even a thing you can buy or do or what.
I don't know. Right, I mean, I've seen them squirt out in the ocean, but I don't know.
I haven't seen that. Yeah, that's the black stuff they shoot out.
Yeah.
But
So,
not acrylic, right?
correct, not acrylic
Plastics.
because of the porosity or lack of porosity in an acrylic. And of course, when you say you don't do this, then there's artists that do that. But, yeah, right, in
That's where
general,
we'll go.
without some proper preparation, pretty much you don't use it with encaustic, and I actually didn't realize that early on, and I had a painting that was acrylic and encaustic, and about 3 years after I painted it, it fell apart. So I can say from experience that probably shouldn't use that. But there are artists out there that are doing things on plexiglass, like sanding down the plexiglass and using that as enough of a surface to create that porosity that will actually, the encaustic will adhere to in certain layers, probably not like a 20 layer. Any other questions? I did bring some hot things, if anybody wants to just see a little demo.
Insurance update in this place.
What I want to do kind of determines the kind of tools I'll use to heat things. So for example, this is a new piece I'm working on, and we're not connected. in any way, shape, or form. And I think some of it is that I need some more lights. I need more contrast in there. And so one of my thoughts was that I could try to lighten an area with embedding some lighter paper.
And that's watercolor paper.
It's on watercolor paper, yep. Yep. And so I'm just gonna
You're
put a
putting
little,
wax on it.
pardon?
You're putting wax?
I'm putting some wax pellets on here. This is the encaustic medium.
That's clear. Some of it's yellow. You probably don't want that big.
It depends on what you want. But yeah,
Stuff
this,
about a little yellow.
yeah, this is the purified art. There's a few encaustic companies that you can
It
get.
wasn't all just beeswax. It wasn't just beeswax.
Or did it have the resin in it? Is it
When
not
you say
resin?
yellow, that makes me wonder.
He was buying beeswax.
Yeah, it's just beeswax.
Oh, it's just beeswax, yeah.
But it has
Right.
For his
Encaustic.
beehives.
Okay, yeah, right, which you can use. But the properties are going to be a little bit different because of that. And as well as the coloring, because it's not purified, it has all the impurities in it, probably.
Which is what
But
we
that's,
desire.
yeah, right, so it just depends on what you're trying to do. And so now I can just take my little tool here and move things around. It's also gonna melt, yep, it's gonna melt some of the wax underneath. So the paper is gonna be embedded from both the top and the bottom.
Sure.
Is that a very thin?
This is a very thin Japanese paper.
Okay.
And you can work with things. If I had a heavier layer of wax, I could embed a little thicker paper. The way I start with the watercolor paper, that is so thick that I adhere that first to my board. I don't try to embed anything that thick because wax really isn't a glue, although sometimes it kind of gets used as that. It's really not a glue. So you just need to be thoughtful in how you use it and how you stick things together with
It's a Crawford student.
yeah, right, that's right, that was her.
Wax is not good.
Wax is not
I
good.
would bet. I don't see any today. Deb, I don't see any scars on your hands.
I know, knock on wood, I don't have too many.
What kind of glue do you use that you're not using or not?
I use yes paste when I apply my paper to my boards. So I can go ahead and I could add some more layers of encaustic over the top of that, but you can kind of see. Now, whoops, got a little spear guy. So now I've covered up some of that, so it's a little more embedded. So now I'm getting a little bit of depth in that because of that.
And if you want to add color, you use that. You just,
You can do that, and I have done that. You can.
Clay, is that?
This is called encaustic paint.
Okay.
So encaustic medium is the clear. Encaustic paint is that with pigment. And you can pigment your own, or I just buy it.
Sure.
But you just mix like regular paint too, so I can mix my different colors. And most of my colors are
Add paint to
mixed.
that.
Encaustic, other colors. So like I think I have
Want to do
Black.
another step?
a.
Can I keep?
It's definitely in a state of being. So, because I didn't want a lot of wax on it, I didn't really want to paint with my brush. So that's why I used just the wax on top and the iron. What I can also do is now that I have that on there, if I use my heat gun, and you can see where it's kind of white, that's where it's not really embedded yet. So,
The art.
you can see how that's coming. And just heating it probably won't embed it quite enough. I need to push it down with something, which I forgot to bring that. But I have some silicone tools that I can use to spread and go over the top of that. So that is one thing, embedding, using this, and you can, I could actually paint. So, when you don't have something, you do something else. So this is hot. So my paintbrush has a lot of black, and then this is my black paintbrush. So I can actually set my brush on this, and I could even, especially if I had a little larger tacking iron or my ski iron, I could actually melt. Well, I can do that right here. I can melt my wax on there, and let's see. Can you see that one that has a blue stripe right there in it? Yeah. You need the black. Thank you very much. Good, thank you. So here, while I have this, this is just a sample that shows multiple layers of encaustic medium. So these first two panels just have one layer of wax. The second panel has 2 layers of wax, and this has 3 layers of wax. So you can kind of see the depth of how you can create depth, push things to the back with that. So that's just a way to do that. And so what I'm going to do is I can just, I'm just looking for putting a little more blue because there's not much blue in that. So I can actually just kind of do some crazy blue things if I just want to add some color. I have to do the cleanup.
When they talk about art, we've just seen it. The touch of the artist.
So I'm embedded. You can use your different tools. Does this bring about any other questions or thoughts?
A million to think of tomorrow. This is just my thing.
Well, Debbie, just thank you for all the
Okay.
great words. And
Fascinating.
we appreciate it.